Hello, everybody. It's 10 o'clock. We are really pleased to host this special Ferncast webinar introducing our new audio codec servers powered by extreme compact software. Thank you for taking time out and joining us today. We are quite excited as we have launched already this new product class. 48 new and innovative products are now available, tailored to your needs. And today you will learn more about this new product, the application covered, and the user benefits. Our webinar today will last 45 minutes, and we will be handling some Q&A session at the end. But please feel free to write your question in the chat during the webinar. We will try to answer them during the presentation or at the end in the Q&A sessions. Please write your question directly in the chat to everybody and not directly to me, so my colleagues can also handle the questions. You will also get a chance today to win a Ferncast t-shirt, so please stay with us until the end. We will do our traditional quiz. We will be also sending out later the on-demand recording when it will be available. Let me introduce the speakers of the day. So Detlef Wieser, CEO and co-founder of Ferncast, Tobias Dornbusch, our product expert, and myself in charge of marketing and communication for Ferncast. Let's have a look to the agenda now. So Detlef will start. Detlef Wieser, he will explain the positioning and he will introduce the new product class and the products. Tobias will describe all the application covered by the audio codec servers, and he will give you some concrete use case example. And to conclude, Detlef Wieser will give you an overview of the pricing and a summary of the user benefits. And as I said, there will be time at the end for questions. I'm going now to give the floor to Detlef Wieser, who is going to introduce the audio codec servers.
Yeah, hello everybody. Thanks Virginie for the nice introduction. A very warm welcome, and I would say a good early morning, a good morning, a good day, a good afternoon, a good evening, because I see that we have people from various time zones in the world. I appreciate very much that you are all coming. Yeah, let me position also the webinar a bit, because it's not so typical that we do a public webinar about products. So far we have done webinars about particular technical parameters, technology. Yeah, we had podcasting, we had secure transmission, a variety of things. But we believe that today, for this new product, we rename it a new product class. I mean, we can later discuss whether you agree on this. So the audio codec servers, a new product class, that we thought it's really worth doing a complete webinar about it. So yeah, on the next slide, we see a bit the idea of positioning. On the right side, you see the trend from, let's say, in the 2 decades, 2010 to 2030, that hardware, I mean, really dedicated hardware, DSP hardware is decreasing, software is increasing, and cloud services are coming up more and more, also for live services. Live services, we know, is the most critical part, so that's probably also why the cloud services are coming slowly in the broadcast industry, but they are coming. And with Ferncast, when we started a bit more than 3 years ago, our clear objective has been to develop software for 24/7 applications, live applications. And so from that point we started, and we said, okay, we want to have a quite wide range of functionality and want to be scalable horizontally and also vertically. So what happened then is that we were quite undercover, I would say, for the first year, a bit more than the first 1.5 years. getting some important customers in the German broadcast market, develop streaming software, introducing podcasting, then grow further. So with the same software, did DVB multiplexing, doing SIP communication. And so the success story really started to grow. In 2020, the team was also growing. So we are almost about 10 people at Ferncast, located in Aachen at the German, Dutch-Belgian border, and in Munich. And yeah, and go further. And what we realized then, I mean, there is really a need for do the next step after we have introduced the software successfully, the next step to go with extreme compact on audio codec servers. What it is about, I will explain a bit later. So on the next slide, we see our typical, let's say, UI impression. So we work with pipe elements. Tobias will go in this much more in detail, but what you see here is a bit the pipe element library. So we have lots of elements you can drag and drop for your application, for your needs. And so it's really very, very much tailored, whatever you like. But it's a very generic library, which is also growing depending on projects we get with our customers, because that's the key important thing for us, to work with our customers and tailor new pipe elements exactly to their needs. The pipe concept on the next slide we see is really simple. It's the drag and drop possibility to work on this with easy redundancy, swift integration, and very intuitive. And so far we got very, very great feedback, which we can see on the next slide also. So we started with quite some important, I think, customers in Europe. So we have lots of public broadcasters in Germany, but also outside, and it's continuously growing. And I can really say that I'm very proud of the team's development in technical things as well as marketing and sales, so that we can say that Ferncast, even as a very young company, and I would say also in difficult times, I mean, you all know that the economy, due to a variety of reasons, is not the one which has been, let's say, a couple of years ago. So that in spite of that, we have been really achieved a footprint, a very reasonable footprint in this broadcast market. And that, of course, has us motivated to go further. So if we look now to the market demand, the all-in-one solutions, then we came to the conclusion, although we started with software and we're very much convinced that we go the route where with, let's say, software only, that we have seen and have realized that there is a need for combining also our software with hardware boxes. I mean, actually, software needs always hardware. I mean, that's obvious. So on our side, it needs servers and PCs. And what we have done now is really combine software with very high quality hardware on the PC and server market, and pre-install software on a variety of hardware. So it's very, very highly customized already. It's very scalable, our offer in price, and we believe also very competitive. So the result is really a new product class. That's how we name it, because we don't, well, in this case, keep selling the software, which we actually do, but we add the hardware so that it is tailored for all the applications, whether this is STL, loudness, DVB, DAB, whether it's DAB, transcoding, audio on demand, studio transmitter links, or SIP, or OTT streaming. And with this variety of hardware and applications, we result to, let's say, 48 solutions, which each of the 48 boxes with extreme compact on it can still be configured and tailored to the customer's needs. So it brings us much further, I think, to a direct solution without selecting too many options, but with the possibility to open up to a quite generic, very flexible platform. The hardware itself, if we have a look to this, is actually 6 different hardware pieces we selected to cover a very, very broad range. When we look to the last 3 years, it's very, let me say, from the market side, easy to get a bit of a picture and position a new company in a certain area. And we have said, okay, let's really pick a range of products so that we are also able to show something from, let's say, the low medium end to the upper end in terms of requirements from the customers, in terms of, does a product have to be very available in terms of redundant power supplies? Does a product have to be very silent so it has no fans? Does a product have to be very, very small and also low cost? So this you can see with our names: Mini, Slim, Slim Redundant, Slim Silent, Silent and Redundant. And I know that Tobias will later on go further in detail on this. To give you an overview what that actually means, we can see here on the product compositions. So you see here still the 6 different hardware types, the server PCs. You see above all the applications. So each application can run on those hardware platforms. And in the third row, you see the number of pipes. Pipes we actually name channels. One pipe can be mono, can be stereo, can be multi-channel. So here we can say on one device, it's 20 pipes, 20 channels, it's 10 channels, 50 channels. So it's very scalable. Of course, there are big differences. On the very high performance devices, it can go up to 50, 100. On the low end, it can actually even go down to 2. That's actually missing here. And also, of course, I think nowadays the world is working with AES-67, Ravenna, Dante, Livewire, and so on. But sometimes still there might be a need for an ASBU or MADI or something like this. Or on the DVB side, instead of an MPEG-TS IP, maybe an ASI interface might be needed. So there are also some hardware devices which can be added to the server platforms to make it, again, very, very much tailored to what the customers need. And there is one more thing which is, I think, also interesting. So what you can see on the hardware devices, we left out displays. I mean, there are no displays here to be seen. And I think displays, of course, have been introduced with a very good reasons, so that people can operate products from the front panel. But if we look to the last 10 plus years, people operate devices remotely. I mean, they typically always operate them with software from another PC, from a browser, and so on. But still, for service aspects, it's very important to get access. So you have a master control room, you have a server room. There is a problem. Of course, your technician needs to go there, needs something to handle the device. And if there's no display, they need to get access. So what we did here is we give each individual unit a QR code, and with the QR code in your smartphone, you can directly hook on the unit, on the device, and do some analysis and get into it. So that's, we will leave a very great combination to reduce cost, because we don't have display knobs on the devices, but still give the same service to customers as they need it. So after this introduction, I think it's good to get into the next area. So I would like to give the word back to Virginie.
Yeah, thanks, Detlef, for this introduction. I would like now to introduce Tobias Dornbusch, our product expert. Tobias is going to describe all the 8 fields of application covered by the audio codec servers.
Yeah, thank you, Virginie, and hello to everybody. I hope you're having a good day. And yes, as Virginie said, we're going to look at the main fields of application as we see them for our products. Though it's worth noting that in many ways our products are so flexible that we often find that customers have very specific, very unique requirements that iXtream, and of course by extension also our audio codec servers, are actually very capable of handling or can be easily adapted to. So if you have an audio transmission or live audio application that is a bit more out there, that we may still be able to help. But yeah, let's take a look at our core applications first. Starting here, we would be looking at OTT Online Radio Streaming. This is in many ways our most core application, I would like to say. This is what a lot of our customers are doing. So for those of you not aware, this is about obviously online radio. So that is provisioning the audio to the CDN, that is to say the content delivery network, which then makes the audio available to the actual end listeners. And there's various formats in which this the audio is supplied to the CDN with their own advantages and disadvantages, of course. In fact, we've done a webinar tackling some of these issues before. And I'm also going to go into a few of those details later, but for now, online radio is all you need to know. Similarly, somewhat related to this is the DVB, especially DVB multiplexing. So this is, of course, for sending out also radio programs in a lot of cases as MPEG-TS streams, or via MPEG-TS streams, I should say, including, of course, as the name says, multiplexing multiple programs together so that they can be transported in a single stream. Here, also important to note, this is probably our second biggest application by this point, or close to at least. And because of this, we've also implemented lots of new features for the handling of like metadata, ancillary data, RDS, so that's the radio data system and so on. So we're also very far there. Then we have podcast creation, or more generally speaking, audio on demand. So what you have to imagine there is, obviously you're all familiar with audio on demand, like when you have podcasting, obviously, of course. But in a lot of cases, users are doing these via third-party services. But what we are offering is that you can do all the processing yourself on, obviously, iStream systems that you have purchased. So the idea is that you have the audio and metadata files that you want to input, and our system does all the processing necessary so that you can then upload it to a content delivery network and then accordingly provide it to the listeners. So you can do all of this in-house. And fourthly, on this particular slide, we have the SDL, which is of course the transmission of audio from a studio site, some sort of, or maybe like a reporter, for instance, who is then streaming it to a transmitter site for an uplink, for example. Next, we have the very general application of transcoding, of course, also often very necessary in a lot of audio applications, which simply means the conversion of formats, whether that is the actual audio encoder that is being changed, or in some cases, we can also include this to mean any other sort of format conversion more generally. Important to note that since iStream is so flexible, in a lot of cases, you can do this in simply as part of a different application, though in a lot of cases, of course, there are situations where the transcoding or the format conversion is the main reason why you're using an iStream system. Similarly, also a kind of processing in a sense is the loudness processing. We have developed our own loudness control, actually, based on EBU R128, as it says there. So for those of you not familiar, obviously you sometimes input audio with varying volume levels. Now, in a lot of cases, when you have a rough sense of how loud or quiet something is, then of course you can just manually adjust the volume. But for one thing, this is very intensive as far as actually user oversight goes. And sometimes you may also have situations where, for instance, a song has a huge difference in how loud or quiet certain passages are. And of course, loudness control is about automatizing this so that it's for the end listener relatively even, so they don't have to constantly adjust the volume on their end, or that you have to pre-adjust it for them. And next, we have DAB to MPEG-TS, somewhat similar to the DVB use case, including, though in this case, of course, this requires the demuxing of a DAB signal, which we now also support. And of course, once it is demuxed, you can do everything else with that, whether that is sending it out as an MPEG-TS, or perhaps even turning it into an IceCast stream, which would bring us back to the online radio, for example, and just about anything else you can think of there. Then SIP and WebRTC, which we have combined here into one application, because they are actually very similar in the way how they are nowadays at least used. So SIP is the session initiation protocol, a very common way to do especially bidirectional audio communication, like of course at the simplest, it's used for like SIP calls, like literally doing voice calls via IP, but also any sort of long distance IP communication, of course. And has very few advantages over like regular RTP. And WebRTC is a fairly similar process using browser and app technology. So that is what you're commonly using when you are using some sort of web platform to, well, have a call or even a video call. And yeah, we also support this as an input and output, so we can interact with these platforms. Here, a bit more detail on the SIP. I mean, obviously I talked about the SIP call element. Otherwise, you often find it in contribution via, OB-WAN and reporter communication to like a studio or hub environment where it's then processed for the end listener. Here, it's maybe nice to note that besides all the audio encoding, processing, and so on devices and software, we're also offering SIP accounts, so that you can actually do the SIP communication via our own servers. And in fact, our customers do get a slight discount, so keep that in mind, should that be relevant for you. And last but not least, interestingly here is that our systems can also be configured as automatic answering machines. Obviously, we're not talking about small scale, like telephone answering machines as you may have it at home, but for instance, for broadcast shows where listeners call in, maybe they're there to answer questions, or they get sent through into the actual show so they can talk to the moderators and the guests and whatnot. And we have a lot of functionality to automatize and do all the audio and call logging for this as well. And often, of course, this is also handled via SIP. And now, as Virginie announced earlier, we have a little quiz for you. Virginie, if you would like to take over for a moment.
Yeah, it's time now for our traditional quiz. You have a chance to win a Ferncast t-shirt. So here is the question today. What is the starting price for audio codec server SIP Slim? So you already saw that we have different form factors and different applications. So the question is for this specific box solution, what is the starting price? So please write your question in the chat to everybody. We will look at the answer at the end, and stay with us. You might win a t-shirt. Now, Tobias is going to show you some concrete use case example with audio codec servers.
Just a quick heads up, so how this is going to work. So I'm going to present the form factors to you, show you some of the specific advantages or specific neat aspects of those platforms, let's say, and then present to you how this might be relevant to specific applications and also how this would look in our user interface. So first, we are going from small to largest, generally speaking. So accordingly, we're starting with the Mini here. As you might be able to guess, this is a very small platform. The image may not make it 100% clear, but it basically fits into your palm. So this is like the form factor of a Nook, as they are called, or a mini PC in general. Notably, a lot of you may now be wondering, okay, I have this nice little device, but apparently it doesn't have any audio interfaces, well, except for that headphone jack there, I guess. So how am I supposed to use it? So, of course, this is actually true of all of our audio codec servers. All of them natively support AES-67. So that's to say audio via the Ethernet port simply. But in addition to that, as we're going to see in a moment here in the next slide, all of our devices also support all kinds of USB audio interfaces. And as you can see here, the Mini has quite a few USB ports available. So because of this, you can actually connect just about any audio interface, assuming they have an USB connection, of course, to the Mini, and therefore have like an analog interface there, or AES EDU, MADI even, Dante, of course. And in fact, you can have multiple connected as far as USB ports are available there. So of course, there's going to be a limit how much you can, how far you can get with the Mini as far as performance is concerned, but it gives you a great amount of flexibility there. Yeah, and as you can guess, this is the smallest use case, so this makes it, or smallest case in this case, the box, making it very good, very small applications, including like the very classic sort of, I just want a single bidirectional SIP call because I'm occasionally calling the sound studio, for example, or I'm a reporter or OB van in the field and I just need to bring this one audio stream to the studio or the main broadcast room or whatever. But it can still be scaled up quite a bit, as we're saying here, up to 10 calls or even WebRTC calls. So you still have a good amount of power even in such a small device. And yes, as I have already mentioned, you can use USB to use any sort of audio interface as input. We have an example, a very nice example here on the right, actually. We can this way we show you that we can actually also do small adjustments to basically sell them as a sort of package in this sense. So as you can see there, the Mini is actually attached to this Focusrite audio interface there, so that you can carry them around as one package and don't accidentally get them lost. Obviously, the small form factor of the Mini is also very convenient for any sort of situation where you have to often carry it around, like the aforementioned OB van, or any sort of situation where you have multiple studios that you're traveling between. And next, here's an example of how this would look or could look in the user interface. So just a general word on this very quickly. So all of our audio codec servers, of course, use our iXtream software, iXtream Compact specifically as a variant. And it has a very distinct user interface. That's not the main topic today, but you're going to see a few examples of this. If you're very interested in learning more about the iXtream user interface, then please check out our website and YouTube channel, where you see a few more examples. And of course, you can also get a presentation from us. But for this particular example here, so we're seeing the phone book in the user interface, which is, of course, especially relevant for SIP communication. As you can see from, as you would expect from a modern user interface, you have all these call buttons for the contacts that have been saved in the phone book, and all the information that you can save there. Important to note, in our software, you can actually do specific audio configuration. That is to say, you know, which channels to use from the audio interface. You can set that for every single contact you have, which again is very useful, especially if you have like a relatively powerful interface connected with like dozens of available channels. So you can specifically say which contacts, when they call you or when you call them, which inputs and outputs they should be using, which is of course very useful. Next, we have the Slim. This is probably the most classic form factor. This should be familiar to almost all of you. So this is a 19-inch device within one rack unit. So a very nice fit for a classic server rack there. But this is also the simplest of these variants. We're going to see more complex or more interesting ones later. Well, not more interesting, but more diverse, let's say. Important to note very quickly here, it does have an actual slot for inbuilt audio interfaces. So in addition to all the ones that you can connect via USB, you can actually also have an inbuilt one, and it's part of our configurator, in fact. So here we are talking a moment about how this might apply to OTT streaming. So this is generally an application that very greatly benefits from great scalability, because in a lot of cases, those will require a very large number of channels, or at the very least, benefit from being expanded later. So the Slim is a very good base platform for this. As you have seen earlier already, we do also have audio codec servers that have inbuilt redundant power supplies. The Slim does not by default, so you would need a different one for that. Though in the case of OTT streaming, this is not as much of a problem because a lot of the time in those cases, redundancy is instead done by having multiple 2 or 3 devices that stream to the CDN at the same time, and that's how you achieve good redundancy. So you don't necessarily need the mechanical redundancy, let's say. Obviously, and then at least in our experience, a lot of the input is done via AS67, but it's nice to have the slot for digital, for example, including MADI interfaces, and the QR code access is of course very nice for a quick checkup when you have like these dozens of connections. Here we have an actual example of how the pipes actually look in the user interface. So here's a little bit more detail on this. Of course, Detlef already gave you the basic idea. I know not everyone here may be fully familiar with the pipe concept, but to summarize it very quickly, a pipe is how we configure and display a connection, and it displays the entire connection from the input to the output as this row of elements. So everything that happens to the connection, everything that happens to the audio signal is displayed in this, these elements, as you can see here. So for instance, with this first one you see there, the HLS AAC 128 one, so audio over IP is an AES67 input. Then there's some metadata that is added, so things like the classical tags of interpreter, radio station, maybe genre, that sort of stuff. It's then encoded in AAC and streamed and uploaded, in fact, as an HLS stream, uploaded here in this case to the CDN. Now, what's special about this particular screenshot is that it displays a very unique feature of HLS compared to, for instance, to IceCast, is that HLS is a format that supports adaptive bitrate, which is to say the listener doesn't need to pick necessarily whether they want like a low bitrate, like a low quality stream, or a high quality stream or something like that. They can just accept the stream, listen to it, and then the stream recognizes, oh, the bandwidth is a bit short here, is a bit low, so it automatically switches to a lower bitrate so that it's still, well, obviously lower quality, but still consistent. Now, the way how you do this in IceStream is that you actually group it together in what we call a multi-bitrate pipe group. And this way you can manage the different quality levels as one group that you're offering, and of course also regulate which ones are available. Next, we have the Slim Redundant. Of course, I've already mentioned that we have also some products with redundant power supplies, and this is in fact the first one of these. Like the regular Slim, this one also has a slot for regular audio interface. So if you don't want or can't use the USB or the AES67 for that matter, then you can also have one inbuilt. And here, for example, we're going to talk a moment for how to apply this to DVB. So in the past, DVB encoders and decoders were often relatively small as far as performance goes. So you often needed multiple, maybe even a dozen separate devices just to handle a few MPEG-TS. But nowadays, and this includes our audio codec servers, your systems can be so powerful that you can easily do even multiple MPEG-TS, multiple multiplexes even on the same system. And this would be an example of such a platform. And in those cases, of course, if you're doing all of this on one system, then it's very convenient to have a redundant power supply, of course, and to give you some security there. Especially noteworthy for DVB here, I already mentioned the fact that you can connect or have inbuilt audio interfaces. This also includes ASI, so asynchronous serial interface, which is specifically used for MPEG-TS use cases like this. On the next slide, we can also see some similarities, actually, how this is handled in HLS versus multiplexing here. So much like with the multi-bitrate playlist in HLS, the way how you configure a multiplex in iXtream is also by having these individual pipes, each one a program of the MPEG-TS that is then multiplexed together to get your one MPEG-TS out of it. Yeah, next we have the Slim Silent. So this one does not have a redundant power supply, but as the name implies, it is actually fully silent because it doesn't have a fan cooler. Instead, it uses a heat pipe system to cool down the system. And yeah, because it is silent, which is relevant for some applications. So we've talked about our loudness before, so I'm not going to reiterate too much here, but as you may be able to imagine, aside from larger broadcast use cases, there's also studio applications that may very much benefit from having this loudness adjustment available. And in our opinion, in almost every studio environment, it would be very convenient to have like fully silent devices instead of worrying about cooler noise, or fan noise, I should say. And here is also where I would like to point out one of the specific advantages that our customizability has. Also something we're going to talk about a bit more later, but it's the option of combining multiple applications on the same system. Now, why is this relevant to loudness especially? Because of course you could have, for example, a situation where you're transmitting audio somewhere, for instance, doing a SIP call, but you also want to have a loudness adjustment. So you could actually combine these two applications on the same system. Here we see an example of how the loudness control configuration would actually look on the system. Now, I'm not going to go into too much technical detail, though if you're interested in how exactly our loudness control works, we actually have made blog posts about this. But this maybe give you an idea how in-depth our loudness control actually is, and therefore how precisely you can actually do this automatic adjustment. And the next step up would be the silent, which is also, of course, a silent version here, though in this case it's 2 rack units. So also much more powerful as far as the hardware is concerned, so it can be scaled up much higher in program numbers. And for this, we have the example of podcasting here. So I've already explained how audio on demand processing and podcasting interacts with iXtream, or what iXtream can offer for this. And the thing is, it varies a lot because, of course, you have smaller users, smaller studios, smaller radio stations, where it doesn't particularly matter how fast the podcast or the audio files are made available for the end listeners. But there's also cases where, especially larger broadcasters, may want to ensure that basically as soon as a radio show is over, the on-demand version is available for the listeners. And in those cases, of course, you need quite a bit of power to do the processing fast enough so that it can be quickly made available. And then, of course, the power of the silent is very relevant. Here, a quick example of how podcasting looks here in our user interface. So you can see the different job pools, as we call them. So this is the different processing workflows that are, as we said, inputting the audio and metadata and processing them for the CDN. Giving you a very quick and nice overview. And last but not least, we have the Redundant, which is sort of our premium flagship audio codec server. As you can see here, also 2 rack units, 2 redundant power supplies, also very powerful ones, as you can see. And this is also the only one of our audio codec servers that actually has multiple slots for different audio interfaces. So even without using the USB, you could have very different interfaces available directly in the system. Yeah, and here a very quick overview of the other applications that we had already mentioned before. But just to really summarize this, how this interacts with the redundant especially, is that many of these applications often require you to work with a very large number of channels and also support very different formats for the input and for the output, of course, almost by necessity in a lot of cases. Then, of course, both the performance power of the redundant is very relevant for the encoding and decoding of all those programs, channels, as the case may be, but also the sheer flexibility that you have as far as the input and outputs are concerned are very relevant for these. And of course, the redundancy is very nice for these because a lot of these are very sensitive applications. And just to give you an idea, because this is especially relevant for things like STL and transcoding, is of course the sheer breadth of inputs and outputs and various formats that are supported. And for this, we have a view here of the actual create pipe menu, which gives you some idea of the sheer variety of formats that are supported, and of course can also be used for STL and transcoding, and of course DAB as well, and any other application really. Okay. Yes, and this is something we would quickly like to reiterate here at the end of this particular section, is that assuming, of course, you have a platform that is powerful enough, you can easily mix and match the application. So you could easily have a, for instance, a Silent that does both the OTT online radio streaming and DVB multiplexing for you on the same system. And well, any other combination are also, of course, possible, which is especially relevant for loudness and transcoding, of course. And if that has piqued your interest, you can actually find a configurator on our website where you can play around a little bit with the options. So do take a look.
Yeah, thanks, Tobias, for all this information. Now let's have a look to the quiz and to the answer. Detlef, do you know if we get the right one? Do we have winners today?
We actually got 2 times the right answer, and it's Angeline and Richard. They gave the right answer, so I think that they searched also a bit for this in the internet and actually found it. I believe so, because otherwise it would have been difficult. So they made it really an exact answer. They gave 795 euros, and so that's perfect. Thanks, Angeline. Thanks, Richard.
Well, congratulations to Angeline and Richard. Detlef, would you like to give us now an overview of the pricing, please?
Sure. I would like to. Thanks, Virginie. Well, what you have seen is really a huge range of products in terms of applications, features, covering a quite range of needs of broadcasters. So that is also reflected by pricing. And of course, we don't want to go too much into it, but we want to give you a bit of an idea here. So that really there is a starting point at the low end, and low means only the number of pipes. The cool benefit, and I think if you have watched the market over decades, you have, I think, seen quite often that very, very professional solutions, professional software has been also offered for a good entry price into the market. And now we start with the Mini and 2 pipes on SIP or other applications already at 795. So that's really the lowest cost entry we offer to people. The smart opportunity here is that they can extend, and then they can run other things on the Mini as well. So you see that there are lots of various prices, and we just picked some to give you examples. So, I mean, of course, it needs always a specific offer on Extreme Compact for the hardware, but this is just to give you a bit of an impression. So there's something less than 1,000, there's something between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4. It's all available. And then, of course, if the installation is very complex and lots of channels, it can go up. And the 17K price range is only an example. I mean, there could also be, of course, much more complex installations where the price might also go up if there's lots of channels, lots of functionality, lots of combination of applications on one platform, or even platforms working together. So that shall give you an overview, and please don't hesitate to ask us for any specific quotes, or just first of all maybe advice whether we cover also your solution. The cool thing also is really availability. So all things we talk about are available. We have some things which are really new, like for instance on DAB we are just entering the market, so there will be quite sure some additions necessary to cover the market, but we have already some customers we talk with. But all other things like SIP and the streaming, the DVB, the transcoding, I mean, we really have already extreme software in place and working. So the user benefits, if we just summarize them, so I hope that you can agree that we can talk about a new product class here. It's not the dedicated hardware, it's a software on generic servers, PCs, but pre-installed, so that you can use them out of the box. You don't have to do anything, it's just working. We have all those fields of applications. It's totally very, very scalable and flexible. Lots of different channels are possible, and yeah, I mean, countless combination of possibilities. We had a few questions already in the chat, interesting questions, whether we can do some event action program. Yes, we can do with the smart applets. We had questions about the QR code, and they were answered. If there are remaining questions, of course, we can go through of them. So yeah, as a final conclusion, we presented you this new audio codec server concept, and hopefully we got your interest in this. And yeah, so looking to the number of people still staying with us, very happy. It's almost the same number as in the beginning. Check the configurator, and then I pass, I think, the moderation back to Virginie. And again, thanks for participating here. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it's we are about to end the webinar, but we are still here until 11. So if you have additional questions, we have some time to answer them now.
Yeah, there was one question, the positioning of the new ACS compared with the Studio. Yeah, I mean, we have Studio, Fernstation and Fernberry also on our website, but of course there are now comparable products here, and there will be also some additional update where the Studio, the Fernstation and the Fernberry migrate into the new audio codec server concept. We did not remove them because they're still available, and also because in order to not confuse really people with removing things which are still there. So yeah, but the answer is yeah, can be of course compared. Have to look into detail which type of features, but will be also covered by the ACS.
How is activated a WebRTC call? We had a question from
Enrique. You have a WebRTC browser page, and this can do peer-to-peer connectivity between browsers, but also of course can do a connection to the Extreme installation, maybe in the master control room. And that's also actually the idea. So you could collect maybe WebRTC reporters connecting to Extreme, and then it will be going into the master control room on AES67 or whatever type of audio it needs to. And we can also do demos. And as Tobias offered already, of course, we can go specifically into your needs by a private webinar anytime. So just ask us, and we do a nice round of 30-40 minutes with you and go through the available features, modules you may need in particular.
Yeah, please feel free to contact us if you have additional questions, or to contact Tobias. He will be happy to give you a personalized demo and a specific quote if you have some requests. I would like to thank you all for your time and your participation again. It was really nice to be with you today. Thanks to the speaker also, and see you in our next webinar. I wish you all a nice day.